Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for Singapore FinTech Festival coverage is my colleague Tony Seo, Head of Marketplace Regulatory Technology with the Market Technology team at Nasdaq, with his global outlook on market surveillance. Tony, it's great to see you again, virtually, of course. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Right, thanks, Jill.
2020 has been a year for record market volatility. How has the volatility impacted market surveillance?
I want to say with the record volatility, it's also brought record volumes, which has been great for markets, but it's really put a strain on all the the systems in place. So from a surveillance perspective, one of the biggest impacts so far has been really making sure that the systems can cope with these huge volumes. Right, we've had one customer where basically everything's doubled in the past year, right? And very quickly as well in February, March. So what we've seen is a few people look at potential new approaches. I would say this year about 2/3, actually maybe 3/4 of our new customers have gone with a cloud solution, right? So people are looking for, I suppose, creative ways around the volume. And then with the volatility itself, right? I mean, what is really brought from a surveillance perspective is a lot more noise, right? So in the end, the surveillance systems, we're looking for a a little needle in a haystack, and essentially that haystack has become a lot more messy, a lot more noisier. Right, so surveillance departments this year have spent a lot of the time tuning and adjusting parameters, right, adjusting the algorithms themselves, and this is this is just a lot more work for the team, right? So it's always been tough keeping pace with how quickly the markets move, but with this increased volatility, the challenge is even greater.
As we approach the end of the year, what do you foresee as the biggest challenges for the surveillance teams in 2021?
Yeah, quite a few. I think 2021 is going to have quite a few things. I think work from home is going to be a challenge, right, as we go into 2021. With surveillance, you have extra problems around privacy, security, employee monitoring, right? So you've got these two camps. You've got surveillance departments where they've managed to make it work, right, and they have been able to work from home. And I think the challenge there is bringing the team back. Then also, I think you're going to see some of these departments and teams wanting to stay work from home, at least for a few days a week, or going into the future. And I think the challenge for the the department is how do we make some of these temporary measures more permanent. And then for some of the other departments, I mean, we've seen some surveillance departments where they haven't been able to access data itself because of, for example, regulatory requirements about the data being on site, right? And then the big challenge there is bring the teams back into the office, right, post-COVID, right, and getting them all back up to speed. And I see that's going to be one of the big challenges we're facing. The other big challenge I see is, which I think is actually a good thing in the end, is this increase in retail activity, right? So we're seeing a lot more retail activity this year. I see that going into next year, and this increase in retail has changed the dynamic a similar way to the increase in volatility, right? The actual behavior of the marketplace is changing, is adapting. And then again, the detection algorithms and the parameters need to be tuned again for these new types of behaviors, right? And then on top of that, as you have these more retail activity, it tends to put more pressure on the team, right? There tends to be more dead ends, more unusual events. And that puts more pressure from a resourcing perspective. And then finally, I think a really interesting challenge that I see is with the recent rise in Bitcoin prices, and really increased number of digital asset places that have started to pop up. What I see going to next year is I see regulators taking a more active role, right? So the challenge that I see is really for these new marketplaces who are essentially needing to put in new surveillance departments, new monitoring teams, new integrity processes in place. The challenge is really for them to step up and work with a regulator and basically say, how do we regulate these new types of assets that are coming on board?
Right, and of course, those challenges can lend to opportunity and of course, being more proactive, especially from the regulatory side. So hopefully that's the silver lining that we get going into 2021. Tony, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.